Hey y'all, welcome to Roots Refuge Farm. My name is Jess. We're in my greenhouse right now. We're going to talk really briefly before I take you out here and show you what we're doing to prepare some of our garden spaces. Now there are lots of different ways to start a garden, to plant a garden, to maintain a garden, and I don't like to teach that there's only one right way to do things. I think that lots of different gardening methods are valid, and they're really going to be dependent on the area you're in, your capacity, the resources you have available to you, the physical capacity you have available to you, as well as the soil and the lay of your land. All of those things are going to play into the style of gardening you choose and the method that you choose to go about doing that. I am a big believer in agitating the soil as little as possible. There's a lot of resources out there for no-dig methods. One of my most favorite people to follow to learn about this is Charles Dowding. That's someone, he's here on YouTube. He's written several books, and I've read his books and watched a lot of his videos. He is a brilliant gardener, and he shows side by side how a no-dig bed versus a traditionally tilled bed, a bed that's tilled every year, the no-dig bed ends up being higher yielding and less work because it allows for a healthier soil structure. And I actually believe in that as well. In our old farm in Arkansas, we had no-dig beds that we had created in the back. I have gone about that in multiple ways, but the ones that the largest area I used in no-dig fashion in my gardens in Arkansas, we created by about 6 months before we needed to plant those beds by laying down a really thick layer of cardboard and wetting it down really good, and then eventually piling compost on top of that and letting it break down the cardboard and then planting directly into that. That is probably in most cases, I think, the easiest way, but it takes more time. And for us, now we're rebuilding our farm in South Carolina from raw land, and we are now developing new garden spaces. And we did not have our plan clear enough 6 months ago to start those beds in that fashion. And now it's coming down to the planting season. So we're going to be doing the other way of establishing a no-till bed, which is, I guess, ironically, is this correct use of the word ironic, is to till, to do an initial shallow till, and then lay down the cardboard, lay down the paper, and then pile the compost up on top of that. And in the course of a couple of years, like next season, we will not go back and re-till those beds. This is just an initial disturbance. Now we're not going to be doing a really deep till. We have about 8 to 12 inches of topsoil here where we are, this particular part of our farm that we're going to be putting these gardens in, and we're going to make sure we stay in that top layer of soil because we don't want to agitate those layers of soil and mix them together because that can be detrimental. The reason we're going ahead and doing it this way is because you can tell by the greenhouse here, we have a lot of plants that need a place to go. Some of these over here, look at this poppy is blooming. Yeah, a lot of these plants are really getting to the point that if they stay in pots much longer, it's going to be a great detriment to them. So we're going to go ahead and do this quicker version to be able to get these gardens planted. Goodness, I stepped out in the sun and started sneezing like crazy. So today you're going to see us using a pull behind tiller with a tractor. Obviously, if you're doing a much smaller garden space, you don't have to have something like this. I would encourage you to look at local equipment supply places, talk to neighbors. A lot of times people have tillers, even if it's just an older model of something. And if you know somebody that has a tractor, if you have access to a tractor and a pull behind tiller, obviously that's gonna make real quick work of it. Look at these cows coming to investigate. What are you doing, girls? This is the tiller we have. We are obviously doing a pretty large space, so that's going to be a lot nicer to use than a walk behind for such a large space. But on a smaller space, it wouldn't make as much sense. The cows are over there going crazy. We're going to be lightly tilling this high tunnel, the other high tunnel, and a big space right here in the ground. This, after the initial tilling, we're going to turn this into like a back to Eden style garden. And then down here, we're going to do a big sweet potato patch. They're so funny. Bear's got to go investigate. So this soil in the high tunnel, we actually had these retaining walls done, and then we backfilled it with soil from our property that we had pulled up when we like did the driveway and stuff. So, I mean, we're lightly tilling this, but it was already obviously very agitated and being moved in. This, though, will be like freshly tilling ground that hadn't been agitated in this big open spot. Good job, Noah. All right, so the next step here is to, Noah's raking, and we're just pulling up any rocks that came up whenever we tilled, and also just any big clumps of roots just like this that I see. Obviously, I'm not going to get all of them, but I can make a little bit of a difference. Alright guys, it's the next day. We're out here working and I remembered that I'm a YouTuber. So I went and got my camera because I should show you this. So yesterday, in the first part of this video, I showed you the initial till to establish what will be no dig beds. So that should be the last time this soil is tilled ever, because in the future we won't have to do that because we'll be able to cover it before at the end of the season and add compost and all that stuff on top. Hello, Will. Are you so excited to have gardens? Alright, so you can see here we've got this cardboard peeking out. Here's the Noahs and Wes. So what we're doing is we're wetting the ground really good, and then we're putting some cardboard down, wetting that really good, and then we're putting probably 3 to 4 inches of compost down on top of this. Now these beds are 4 foot by 12 foot here in the middle. I'll explain my layout here in a moment. And what we're topping this with is some really broken down wood chip mulch. Now the beauty is that everything that we're adding here will become soil. Around the edges you'll see we have this plastic ground cover. And that's good for maintaining the walls of the high tunnel, because obviously that's not something you want to weed eat because you'd tear up your plastic, and that's going to suppress the weed growth around the edges. But in here, everything that's on the ground will biodegrade over time. And as you can see, this is where we tilled yesterday. We're walking all over it. Normally if you were tilling to plant in it, you wouldn't want to walk on it, but here the main purpose was to rip up that vegetation. It was a real shallow till, and then now by adding this on top, as that cardboard breaks down, what we plant here will be able to work its way into the soil underneath, and actually that soil underneath is going to build structure. So right now there's obviously a very distinct difference between this compost that's going on and the native soil that was here. This compost is super full of life, and by covering this, the earthworms, they love cardboard. They're going to come up through this cardboard and they'll mix all together, and in another year if you were to dig down, you won't really be able to see so clearly where that compost ends and that native soil begins, because they're going to build a really healthy ecosystem where we're putting these beds. So I chose this layout in the high tunnel because, as you can see, we don't have the end walls up yet because it's not even anywhere near freezing. We will put those end walls up, but we wanted to go ahead and get planting, and we were waiting on some lumber. So we decided to go ahead and plant, and then we'll put the end walls up either, I don't know how soon we'll do that. It doesn't really matter right now, because once we put the shade cloth on top of this, it's going to serve its purpose. The high tunnel in a hot place like South Carolina does help extend the season through the winter, but it really helps extend the season through the hot summer by holding a shade cloth. And this high tunnel is going to be tomatoes, peppers, some ground cherries, and eggplants. And I'll probably companion plant along these rows where the tomatoes are going to be, with maybe some herbs and some other little things. I'll probably go ahead and put some flowers in here, just like companion plant style, but largely this is for those 4 things: the ground cherries, eggplants, peppers, and tomatoes. I decided that we would run beds down the side here. These are narrow, they're only 24 inches wide, and we're planting lower growing things in here like peppers and eggplants, because once we do have the end walls up, the main ventilation here are these sidewalls, and I didn't want anything that was going to grow really tall and block off the wind flow. And actually I decided to turn these beds perpendicular here. These are 4x12, and that way each one will hold a cattle panel for a trellis that we can grow tomatoes on, but with them being perpendicular, the wind can still flow through here because the tomatoes are going to grow really, really tall. And we're actually going to play around. I'm thinking where the bed lines up with the support here, doing some supports that tie off the top. So kind of maybe experiment a little bit, but we were going to lose too much floor space to try to line those up on purpose. So some places they don't line up, and that's okay. So I said earlier that the ideal way to set up a no-till bed is 6 months before you need it. Because ideally, had we set this up 6 months before we needed it, maybe like covered it with some plastic or something like that, the cardboard would be fully broken down. It would be just ready to plant. By doing this right now and planting into it, we're going to have to be aware that we make sure we keep it good and moist so that that cardboard will break down enough that anything we plant in this compost can make its roots through the cardboard. So all of my pepper plants are kind of small, so we're going to plant those directly into the compost because they're still small enough that their roots can just fit completely. However, we're going to have to make sure we're watering those regularly to make sure that cardboard breaks down, that the roots of those plants can get through. Now with the tomatoes that are going in these beds, we're actually going to break through that cardboard ourselves and plant them where they're going through it already. So a lot of people make the mistake when they build a no-dig bed by piling compost on top of cardboard and then planting in it immediately. If they'll look at their plants and say, well, they look fine, I don't think I need to water them, but it's really the cardboard that you need to water because you need to make sure that it is being able to be broken through by those plants' roots. It doesn't take a lot. 2 weeks of like steadily being watered every 2 days, if it's getting like good and soaked, it'll be mushy enough that roots can grow through. And the beauty is that these plants, they're already up in the sunlight, so they're going to be strong and their roots will grow down, whereas the plants that are underneath are going to be, if they're trying to pop up, they're going to be kind of weak because they don't have the sunlight and they're trying to reach the sunlight. So they're trying to send their shoots and leaves up, whereas these are trying to send roots down, and these will be more successful in getting through that mushy cardboard than anything that's underneath it, which is what we're trying to suppress. Yet again, the next day, this vlog is really spanning across the week. We finished the space in the high tunnel yesterday, and now we are doing the same thing out in the in-ground garden. We just continued the process that I showed yesterday with laying down cardboard, soil, really it was compost, and then a well broken down wood mulch on top. We've been running the sprinkler in here just to make sure that this is very well saturated. We want to make sure that our cardboard is like really able to disintegrate quick, and it's already getting very soft, so that's good. We started planting a little bit yesterday. We're gonna get it good and wet and finish planting that. I'm actually not doing this method in this high tunnel because I'm doing something a little different in here, but we are doing this in the ground out here. So the majority of this area has been covered by a tarp for about almost 2 months. And we did do a quick till on the edge and on the back, and we're basically gonna till row by row and build these beds so that we can use equipment to fill them, because this is about a 4,000 square foot space. Hold on, that's not right. It's about a 3,000 square foot space. It's still a large space. Hey Austin,
hey,
what do you think?
Yeah, it's looking good.
Looking good. It smells good, doesn't it? That fresh pine chips. So on the edges here, down this side and along the back, we just put this really fresh pine mulch. It's not broken down. So this is going to be essentially our walkway. And I purposefully did a row going long ways here on the back because this is a little bit of a slope downhill, and I just want something that's kind of going to stop and hold the water. So we're actually going to go this way on a couple rows on the back, and then we'll turn them and go that way. Just a little bit of interest, trying to keep the water drainage in mind, but we're using the fresh pine mulch in the rows. Now I would not want to plant under this or in it because it's way too fresh. It's going to be way too much sequestration of nitrogen. It's just going to pull nitrogen out, but our rows are going to be kind of wide. it will probably pull nitrogen from the edge of my row. Like I said, I think as long as it's not on top of where we're planting, it'll be okay. And the reason I wanted to use that on the walkways is because it is so fresh, it'll actually hinder the weeds a little bit more. If you've ever tried to plant in fresh wood chips, it probably hindered your garden. So I want to use that to our advantage and hinder the weeds. For this particular garden, since I'm not hurting for space, I am going a little wider on the walkways because eventually I might change the planting layout as all of this stuff breaks down over the coming years. Noah's bringing his carpentry skills to the Roots and Refuge garden. I don't think I've had a straight garden row in my life.
Yes, ma'am.
I have never made a straight garden row.
As long as Noah's around, that's all you're gonna have.
Yeah. Noah is precise. Right, Noah?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey guys, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video off now to keep it kind of on the shorter end so it doesn't get too long and daunting. I do think I covered the gist of how to create these beds. If you do not have access to compost that you are going to put on top of your cardboard, you can just put wood chips. You're just going to need to give them a longer period of time to break down. I will update the process of growing in these beds over the season, as well as making videos about the other beds that we're going to be building. We're doing a few different styles. So thank you for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.